Death at Bishop's Keep. Chapter 3. What astonishing news you have brought me! A long-lost relative, a sea voyage, a manor abroad. It is so extraordinary a narrative that I can hardly credit it. Ah yes, but the tale is not such a simple one, my dear. There is yet a great deal more to be learned. Anonymous. A Mother's Plot, 1887. Rodney P. Kellerman glanced at his gold-plated pocket watch and pulled a sheaf of papers from a drawer of the desk that Pinkerton's provided him. 5 minutes later there was a knock on the office door, and a boy in a yellow and green plaid waistcoat opened it wide enough to admit his shoulders and a head of unruly hair. "Young lady to see you, sir," he said. "Show her in, please," Mr. Kellerman said, resolving that this interview should be conducted with far greater dignity on his part than the last. The young woman who entered and took the chair on the other side of the desk was, according to the information he had gathered, an orphan raised by her mother's family, at present unemployed and a spinster. What's more, she was likely to remain so, in Mr. Kellerman's opinion, because she was already nearing the end of her 25th year. And also because she was not the sort who gave herself graces. He glanced at her face as she settled herself and took off her grey knitted gloves. It was a strong face with a too resolute mouth, heavy brows, and a decisive chin. The eyes were of an intense hazel green that seemed to see a great deal. The nose was amply dabbled with gingery freckles, and the cheeks bore no trace of the paint that some young women, even in the better of classes, affected. The thick auburn hair, richly highlighted with russet, had escaped from the combs meant to subjugate it, and the dishevelled locks staggled untidily over her white collar. The costume, a sturdy brown wool suit with plain brown buttons, lacked feminine decoration, except for a bit of cream lace at the wrists and the throat. An unprepossessing person, Mr. Kellerman concluded, and altogether unfeminine, although if he had been truthful he might have conceded that his judgment was somewhat coloured by his chagrin at having allowed her to catch him out so handily on a Tuesday night last. That he had been discovered at his work by this observant young woman still greatly nettled him, although, to his credit, he had followed her unseen and done his detecting undetected for the better part of the preceding week. He had watched her, for instance, when she went to seek employment with the publisher of Frank Leslie, whose offices she had visited on Tuesday, and he thought to use that bit of knowledge to his advantage. "You should tell me why you were following me," Miss Ardley began with asperity. Her voice, as he had noted in their earlier meeting, was deep and rich, a husky contralto. "I'm curious to learn who made it worth your while to go to such effort." As she folded her hands in her lap, Mr. Kellerman observed that the forefinger of the right hand was ink-stained. "One would have thought," he remarked critically to himself, "that she would have scrubbed away this telltale badge of a previous secretarial engagement." It reinforced his belief that such a person was likely to remain an old maid. A woman who cared about improving her marriage prospects would surely eradicate this tattletale mark of her spinsterhood. Mr. Kellerman withdrew his attention from Miss Ardley's unfortunate hands. "I shall inform you," he replied. He spread out a sheaf of papers and raised them precisely. "I'm in receipt of a letter from your aunt, Miss Sabrina Ardley of—" "My aunt?" Miss Ardley's hazel eyes, which now appeared to be flecked with a deeper green, fastened on his. "Mr. Kellerman," she said firmly, "I have no such relation." "My dear Miss Ardley," Mr. Kellerman said with exaggerated patience, "we will never get to the bottom of this if you persist in interrupting me." He moved to the top of the paper a quarter of an inch. "May I resume, please?" The young woman's mouth tightened. She nodded imperceptibly. "Miss Sabrina Ardley of Bishop's Keep, Essex, England," he continued, "contacted me several weeks ago through her British solicitors, the firm of Edgecombe, Harcourt and Harcourt. Miss Ardley identified herself as an aunt of yours, the sister of one Thomas Ardley, whom public record shows to have been your father. She wished me to discover whether at present time you might be a suitable secretary and companion to her. Having made the necessary inquiries, I have conveyed to Miss Mr. Winston Edgecombe, the firm's senior partner, and her personal representative, my judgment that, upon a trial basis, you would indeed be suitable for such employment. Employment? Miss Ardley exclaimed in a tone of restrained surprise. In England? Mr. Kellerman ignored the interruption. Miss Schreiber, your most recent employer, left ample testimony to your intelligence and integrity and to your competence as an amanuensis. She was apparently much impressed by the fact that you acquired German in order to assist her with the letters and to read to her, and by your skill in manipulating a typewriter. That, at least, is her attorney's recollection. Upon my inquiry, your previous employer, Miss Isabella Dawson, certified to me that you were able and industrious in your care of her children. He cleared his throat, though not, in Miss Dawson's words, a natural-born lover of babes. He paused. Miss Ardley's head was bowed, her eyes fixed on her laced fingers. Do you have any question to this point? Miss Ardley looked up. Miss Schreiber's attorney and Miss Dawson, these are the sum of your inquiries? Feeling somewhat surprised by the question, Mr. Kellerman countered with a prudent one of his own. Are there positions I have overlooked other than your efforts to find secretarial employment with the publishing firm of Frank Leslie? The answer, which was tempered with a smile, came with sufficient readiness to satisfy whatever suspicions he might have begun to entertain. No, sir, Miss Ardley said. There are no other positions. I have been employed for regular wages by no persons other than the two in your report. He nodded. Very well. Then I shall proceed. Having received and conveyed these satisfactory reports of your abilities and the fact that you are presently unengaged and at leisure, I have received yesterday a response from Miss Ardley, relayed by cable through Mr. Edgecombe. It directs me to make the following offer. He picked up a yellow Western Union cable and read, In return for a generous annual salary, board and room at Bishop's Keep, Dedham, as well as the cost of transportation from America to said location, Miss Sabrina Ardley proposes to engage Miss Catherine Ardley as her secretary and personal companion for a trial period of 12 months. If the arrangement is satisfactory to both parties, it may be continued indefinitely. If at any time it becomes unsatisfactory to either party, Miss Catherine Ardley will receive wages earned to date and return fare to America. He put down the paper. You are asked to respond by cable as soon as possible. Miss Ardley unclasped her fingers and clasped them again, although without nervousness. Calm as a custard she was, Mr. Kellerman thought, and her air of thoughtful self-possession disconcerted him. Most of the women of his acquaintance would have been flung into an absolute tizzy by the revelation of the hitherto unknown aunt who proposed employment, not to mention the opportunity of an exotic sea voyage and a visit to the romantic-sounding Bishop's Keep. But Miss Ardley, it seemed, was concerned with practical, not romantic or exotic matters. This aunt of mine, of what age is she? What is her health? She asked. Is she a traveller, or does she prefer to stay at home? What duties are expected of me? Mr. Kellerman spoke regretfully. I am afraid I cannot answer your questions, Miss Ardley, for I have not met the lady. Neither she nor Mr. Edgecombe offered further details of the post, I infer. He added, based on the expense which she incurred to confirm your suitability that your aunt is quite well off. He coughed delicately. Miss Ardley persisted. Bishop's Keep, what kind of place is that? What about Dedham? And what does Miss Ardley consider a generous salary? Dedham, I understand, is a small village some 60 miles to the north and east of London, 10 miles from the town of Colchester. Its chief claim to fame, I recall, is that it lies near the home of John Constable, the famous painter. As to Bishop's Keep, I cannot speak nor to the amount of the salary, nor to Miss Ardley's definition of generous. Miss Ardley lifted her chin. I am to know nothing of my employer, nor the position, she said tartly, and yet I am asked to commit myself to a full year's employment in a foreign land across the ocean from my own. She paused. It would appear that I am being asked to buy a pig in a poke. So it would appear, madam, Mr. Kellerman said, although I might note that such a position offers more in way of, say, adventure than a place at a publishing house. If indeed adventure is to your liking, he added hastily, and paused. Perhaps you wish some time to reflect or to consult those elders who might guide you, your Uncle O'Malley, for instance, or your priest. It is, after all, a matter of some significance." "It is indeed," Miss Ardley said. She looked down at her hands and then up again. Her steady eyes clear and direct. Quite her best feature, Mr. Kellerman decided, excepting perhaps that deep voice that reminded him somehow of brown velvet. However, since there is little information of real substance upon which to reflect, and since no more will be forthcoming, reflection is likely to prove unprofitable. While I respect my Uncle O'Malley, his opinion can only be less well-informed than my own." Her smile was dry. "And as to a priest, Mr. Kellerman, any Pinkerton man worth his salt would have ascertained that I am not a practicing Catholic. I am, in fact, a free thinker." Mr. Kellerman winced. Miss Ardley had reinforced his perception that hers was a too wilful nature. But she was regrettably correct. He had not thought to report her failure to attend church services, and he should have. It might have made a difference to her prospective employer. However, it was too late now. He had tendered the offer, and the young woman was pulling on her gloves. She picked up her reticule and stood up. "Mr. Kellerman," she said, "please reply to Miss Ardley's cable with the simple word, 'yes.'" Mr. Kellerman stood up as well, surprised by the precipitous response, but glad for the end of the interview. Miss Ardley was a young woman, much too definite in her inclinations, decidedly unfeminine in her appearance, and entirely too forthright. What would be the outcome of this unusual enterprise? How would her new employer respond to this rather too assertive person? These questions Mr. Kellerman quickly dismissed as being beyond his responsibility. After all, it was Miss Sabrina Ardley who was buying a pig in a poke.